bird fly? Can the bird fly? Not until those wings are equally developed can the bird fly. Can the bird fly?
Okay. Hi, welcome everyone. So we have a special guest speaker here tonight, Dr. Nanaz Pirnia, and I might just read her bio quickly before she starts. Dr. Pirnia is a psychotherapist, neurotherapist, and educational psychologist in private practice for over 32 years. She has been consultant to many schools, including the Beverly Hills Schools. Nanaz is specifically involved and experienced in working with children and adults who have behavioral, emotional, social, psychological, or educational problems. Full evaluation and assessment of children and adolescents, marriage and family counseling, and individual neurointegration therapy are the range of her expertise. Nanaz Pirnia is the founder and director of the Mind Therapy Center. She runs seminars for expectant parents, parents of newborns and young children, parents of teenagers, couples, and professional therapists. She is the originator of the Circle of Happiness system for teenagers and adults who seek balance in life. She is a frequent lecturer and radio TV guest speaker. She is the creator of an innovative neurointegration therapy to optimize the brain for better health, as well as improving and eliminating symptoms and disorders that interfere with the body and mind. So, warm welcome to Dr. Pirnia.
Aloha, friends. I'm extremely excited to be with you today and share with you some really interesting data and research that it's based on neuroscience, neurointegration therapy, and I think it's quite helpful to understand what the Baha'i faith is talking about when we say equality of men and women, and how based on the song that we just heard, we actually are like the two wings of a bird. And the two wings, it doesn't mean that they're the same, but they have different responsibilities. And we are at the time in the universe that it's giving us that opportunity to get to the adult phase of manhood. And it's interesting that I started as a therapist for 35 years, and then I accidentally became involved with neuroscience, and information about the brain fascinated me because before knowing what neuroscience and what the study of brain is, I was just a psychotherapist, marriage therapist, hypnotherapist, play therapist, but it was basically talk therapy and some meditation, of course. But we really had no knowledge that the brain is neuroplastic. And the information that you read in the books right now is basically based on the fact that it was assumed that the brain neurons, what it's given to us at birth, is actually fixed, and there is no neuroplasticity. And we thought that we do our talk therapy and we sent our patient based on their symptoms to a doctor for medication to basically help them to mask the symptoms. About 15 years ago, I became involved with the inventor of HEG neurofeedback, which is a part of a neurointegration therapy, optimizing the brain and helping the brain to have a better balance between the left and right hemisphere of the brain, and to bring the electrical connection back to the brain, and to be able also to understand that our brain cells from birth to when we die constantly is changing, and it's neuroplastic and it's not fixed. Now you have to realize that 200 years ago, Baha'u'llah and then Abdul Baha talked about our brain and the female versus male brain, the masculinity versus femininity in the world, for coming to bring and complement the brains and function as a unit and fly like a bird and have compassion and have logic. The neuroscience, especially only in the past 10 years, really understood how the brain cells are working and how fascinating it is that our brain is neuroplastic. We can change the brain cells by our lifestyle, by what we eat, how we sleep, how we control our stress, by having spirituality introduced to our lives, helping not to get sick, manage our health, manage the environment, the toxicity, and etc. So I came to work as a neurotherapist, and not only we realized that brain is neuroplastic, and I can change and I can affect the brain with neurofeedback, light therapy, motion, music, and nutrition. We understood that brain is epigenetic, meaning that genetic is only about 10% the potential of the growing cell, and the rest is up to us from the time the baby is born, the kind of parenting we do, the kind mother we have, and the kind of education and lifestyle we provide for our children matters. So now we learned that the first 7 years of life, that as a psychologist, I would say that it's important how discipline is important and how love is important. It's important to connect all the cells in the growing brain of a baby. The first 7 years, all the cells in the brain, all the neurons, and all the connections happen. So look what an amazing opportunity and responsibility we have as women to raise the kids that not only they have emotion, but they have logic, and not only they are safe with where they live, but they're also emotionally and spiritually trained for the brain cells to grow and mature to the front of the brain. And I give you that feedback because brain is complicated. And now as a neuroscientist, as a psychoneurotherapist, I'm fascinated with what we have in our writings. Everything that neuroscientists are telling us, it is in our books. Everything that we have to do to help a brain to get to the adult phase of maturity, of unity, and of humanity is actually written in our books. Before I tell you the connection, I also wanted to tell you that 90% of what you feel, what you think, how you how your emotions are, and what you do, your behavior, is based on the right connection between your brain cells. And now with our technology, we can actually, with the quantitative EEG brain mapping, and we have the state of the art, we do a brain map, and at any age from age 4 up, we can actually understand if there is a lack of connection between the cells or if there is overactivity in the brain cells. And we can do the right diagnosis based on the symptoms. And with neurointegration therapy, family therapy, and spiritual therapy, we can rewire and reconnect our brains. Now, when we look at the men versus women brain, of course, they're very similar, but they're also very different. And Baha'u'llah talked about this difference. This is how it goes. Based on our experiences over the centuries, the way that the first men and women lived in a cage, and men had to hunt and look for food, and women had extra anxiety worrying about parenting their kids, the elderly, and the food and security and safety. The design of the male brain is different from female. And we talk about that. I just made some notes that, like, women use the right brain more than left brain. And right brain is the emotion and anxiety, and left brain is more logic, more practicality, and less anxiety, and sometimes more depression. So over the years, men were less detail oriented, and men were good in finding directions, running around. Men are not so much multitasked. Men can be more practical. They can focus on one thing and then go to the next subject. They have less neurons with emotion and more into the logic, and they can be more visual and less sensual and sensitive. Women over the years, in general, they learned to have a lot of anxiety, to worry about 10 million things, to be multitasked, and by the time my husband serves himself with apple juice, I fix the bed, I check the kids, I make the food, I get them ready, they're at the door to go to school. And women basically are more sensual, and we have developed a lot of more connectivity in the front of the brain between emotion and logic, and therefore we are the warriors of the world. And also that's why we're more verbal and we talk more, and we also feel more and can have more empathy. But it's fascinating that in our recent neuroscience research, now we know that that masculine and male brain over the years had different responsibilities, and therefore the male brain, which we all have, it can be limited in processing and feeling emotions, and for being able to sit down and be able to express emotions easily. Because women, because of what the history taught us, we are more able to use that area of the brain. And Abdul Baha writes, men and women are the same, but they have different functions. But these functions are complementary, and both must be equal for a perfect result. And believe it or not, neuroscience says the same thing. The way we say this writing is that humans started with the reptile brain, which we all have, which is our first brain, which is like a snake and it's like lizard. It's fight and flight. It has no emotions, and it can only get upset and angry or leave. This is the first brain that triggers all these emotion and anger and all the things that you see in the world with racism and everything that helps people not to be united. We have that reptile brain, and we believe that was the child brain. So over the centuries, we started with that child brain, with that reptile brain. Men would go hunting, and it was full of fear and anxiety for them not to be eaten by animals. So we all learned that fight and flight. Then we have the emotion brain, which is our second brain, which that emotion brain is actually like dogs and cats. So when we get emotional, we've got the option to become like a reptile and attack or fight or be reactionary, or to become defensive or aggressive, or to use the third brain that it's only ours, which is the intellect brain. It's the adult brain. It's the reasoning ability. It's problem solving. Is loving the universe. If respecting differences. And what happened is, based on the writings and based on neuroscience, believe it or not, we are moving on from the reptile mode, from the child mode, and from the teenage mode, and that emotionally imbalanced mode, to the adult era for our brain. Our brain, within the past 40 years, have been evolving, and because of the advancement of technology and science and neuroscience and advancement of exposures and learning, the brain is actually mutating to have much more neurons, much more ability and capability to become a real adult, a real amazing human being on the universe. And what happens is that this is exactly what the chaos you see today is, the chaos of also the mutation of neurons. The amount of information is so much that it's going to take between 3 to 5 years for our brain to adapt and to be able to process this much information. So this is the age of hecticness and chaos of the brain. But in order to get to that humanity and to real equality between female and male, it's not that superficial thinking that I see in my marriage therapy between couples. They fight because they say, we're both educated and I want to work and you want to work. I don't have time to cook and you don't have time to cook. I don't have to take care of the baby. You need to get up. That is not called equality between men and women. That is not the wing that Abdul Baha mentioned, because the wing, once one is up, the other wing goes down. It's actually different responsibilities and different abilities for us as a male and female to make us a whole, complements the universe and brings about children that they are happier than what we see in the world today. We are actually, based on the writings of the Baha'i books, we're suggesting that women should be for sure educated, and also we need to raise men, boys, that are more understanding and are more emotionally intelligent, because right now it's such a new age and men should not worry about shelter or being attacked, that the growing brain of our children can mature and prune both from the left side, which is logic, and right side, which is emotion, understanding someone else's feelings. So what we do now, we recommend that if your son fell down and hurt his knee, don't say boys don't cry. No, boys can cry too. When boys want to have any emotion or show their emotion, this is the time that we want to let them express. And we heard in that beautiful song that was singing that humanity is truly like a bird with two wings. So the one is a male and the other one is a female. And unless both wings are strong and impelled by some common force, the bird cannot fly heavenwards. According to the spirit of this age, women must advance and fulfill their mission in all departments of life. Becoming equal to men, they must be on the same level as men and enjoy equal rights. This is my earnest prayer, and it is one of the fundamental principles of Baha'u'llah, which Abdul Baha said. And it's really interesting that, like an expert, Baha'u'llah, like an expert in neuroscience, before we knew anything about our brain, he says, women and men have been and will always be equal in the sight of God. The establishment of equal rights and privileges for women and men is a precondition for the attainment of a wider unity that will ensure the well-being and security of all people. So you have to realize here that we are at a special decade in the universe. And we have a responsibility as Baha'is, especially as Baha'is, because we really truly believe in this unity and this opportunity for equality in a true sense, because it's only with that opportunity of equality that we will raise new human races that will have a happier life and will see happier times. I think, like Abdul Baha writes, the world in the past, and listen to this is exactly what it is that we just found out. The world in the past has been ruled by force, and that's the reptile brain, that's the first brain. And man has dominated over women by reason of his more forceful and aggressive qualities, both of body and mind. And that's in our past. But the balance is already shifting. Force is losing its dominance. So we're moving out of the teenage years of that emotion reptile brain. And mental alertness, intuition, and the spiritual qualities of love and service, in which women is strong, are gaining ascendancy. Hence, the new age will be an age less masculine. Listen to this. It's going to be less masculine, meaning the male brain, that compartment, the left brain, that had a dominance. And with neuroscience and with what we do with neurointegration therapy, with meditation, love, music, sensors, nutrition, we actually more permeated with the feminine ideals, the female brain, an age in which the masculine and feminine elements of civilization will be evenly balanced. And I thought I want to share with you this amazing insight and this comparison, because it's only with all the fights, with all the disharmony and heartbreaking news around the world, I think this is the only way. And by raising this kind of children, we're going to bring a bit of a completeness and perfection in the human and on the human world. And hopefully we will depend on that equal wings to really become that human and that person and that spiritual being that we were meant to be. And I'm gonna leave it at that. And if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
Oh, thank you so much. That's amazing. Yeah, if anyone has questions, feel free to unmute yourself to ask, or you can write it in the chat if you'd rather not speak out loud.
Thank you very much. It is such a difficult subject, brain, and you explained it so in a simple form. And I thought, my God, this was so easy for me to understand. I appreciate you very, very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There's so much about the brain we know today that I'm glad to tell you that all the symptoms that we have, any feelings from anxiety to depression to ADD to schizophrenia to autism to sleep issues, weight issues, anything that you can see is just symptoms. And the way we go to a dentist if we have toothache, now we can go to a brain specialist to understand why we have the problem. And that will help the humanity, because drug treatment without knowing the base of the problem is going to cause more trauma and drama in the growing brain. And but it's fascinating how there is such a huge connection with what we talk about as this equality, as this um, adult time in the life of human beings, and what Baha'u'llah said, which is fascinating to me.
No, no, Sean. Even these days, I hope there is. I heard that they are going to change this, but children, little children at the school, I think they are under influence of many drugs in order to control them. Maybe they're overreacting or overactive for whatever reason. Is there any changes in that regard? I mean, what we are going to do with children who are under influence of drugs already at younger age?
Yeah. Unfortunately, our society, and I can say in the world, drug therapy and self-medication and also pharmaceuticals had a big part in healing the brain in a sense. But unfortunately, drugs, what they do is they mimic the good nutrients of our brain cells, and they actually go through the brain blood barrier in about 5 to 20 minutes, depending on what you take, and it masks the problem for a few hours, and it gradually, um, unfortunately, takes away from all the happy nutritions and good happy drug nutritions that we already have in our brains, like dopamine, norepinephrine, adrenaline, and oxytocin, and much more. Gradually, with the joy and that immediate release of dopamine, happy hormone in the brain, for a few hours you get high, and then it actually fades away. And because it takes away from our own happy hormone, we started to crave for a little bit more high or a little bit of feeling good temporarily. And that's how the cycle of addiction starts. And many times, as you said, kids can self medicate themselves because then they may be able to sit, relax, not have anxiety, or pay attention in the classroom. Today, instead of just going to a rehab, when we do the brain map, we will understand the lack of electrical connection between the cells in 19 areas, which are responsible for what we feel, what we think, and what we do. And with that diagnosis, we receive a thorough report from our neurologists. We have a big database, and we can understand the amount of anxiety, depression, memory, if that person is at risk for dementia or Alzheimer's. We can understand all the emotional issues and learning, math, and speed of reading and reading comprehension and attention. So it gives us a profile on what's going on in someone's brain, and we let them have their drug or have their medication, but we start with doing our neurointegration therapy with neurofeedback, light, motion, and sensors. And we also do a simple urine test, which we can send it to everywhere around the world to understand our neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are the connectors of the cells together biochemically. So when we talk about hormones, when we talk about proteins, it means neurotransmitters. And we check that with the urine test, and we understand what the person doesn't have enough of, and why they need drugs, or why they have addiction. And the nutraceutical lab instead of pharmaceutical lab in our neuro lab, we make the essential vitamins, proteins, and amino acids that you need. So with kids, teenager, you really need to be careful because this is the age of addiction. All the electronics, all the food, all the sugar intake. Sugar is worse than cocaine in the brain, and getting off sugar is more difficult, believe it or not, of getting out of cocaine. So we need to understand why we have the craving in order to help that person to get off the things that it's the craving of the brain. Craving means a lack of balance of nutrients in the brain, and we can assess that now.
Thank you.
May speaking. That's next goal, sugar, less harmful than refined sugar is natural sugar, less harmful than refined sugar.
Yes, you see, sugar is in every food that we eat. And the more you eat of something, brain gets into a new habit between 3 to 6 weeks. So if I start using sugar from today, in about 3 to 6 weeks, I'm gonna crave that sugar. If I use salt, it's the same thing. So you can have refined sugar, or Trivia is a good form of sugar, and they have it everywhere at Costco. But if it's over 25 milligram a day, sugar goes to this blood-brain barrier and to your brain within 3 seconds. So sugar is the fastest thing that give us a hype and give us that high. And if you start using it too much, the brain with sugar, I'm sorry I'm using this, but this is coming from our neurotherapist who's doing our brain map. He says that too much sugar makes people dumb. And in a way, it means that the release of, when we take sugar, the brain stopped releasing the happy hormone, the fun hormones, the pleasant hormones much faster. And that's why the intake of sugar is extremely important, including the sodas that you take, including processed food, because the more the food is processed, if you take hot dog and mortadella too much, these are processed food. We want to go back to a real food, to good source of different vitamins, proteins, good fat. But as you said, you take some sugar, it's fine. Anything in moderation, I have no problem with. But if you take something too much that it's toxic to your brain, we are as good as the food we eat. And it's going to reflect in our thoughts, in our memory, in our sleep, in inflammation, in diabetes, etc., etc.
Nanaz, I have a question, if I may.
Sure.
You were explaining so wonderfully. First and foremost, let me thank you for your beautiful talk. You always inspire me, you educate me. I'm constantly learning from you. And the more I listen to you, the more I realize how much more I want to learn from you. But the question I have, as you know, I'm taking this back to the Baha'i devotional part of this section. One of the major things that the world is struggling with, especially in the United States, but honestly, it's a global thing, is racial unity, the obstacles to racial unity. A lot of talks are being held about that. And with regards to the brain, which parts of the brain, because this has been a struggle in the United States for 400 years. We've seen it in the Baha'is of Iran for 160 years. So racial or any kind of discrimination and injustice has been deeply rooted in human nature, perhaps from the time of Adam and Eve even. I don't know how far back it goes. But for today's purposes, with regards to bridging and closing this divide in racial disunity, which parts of the brain can we is responsible for that, first of all, you know? And how can we address this in the Baha'i format, in the discussions that we hold? How can we use which part of our brain and how can we make it better? Thank you.
I think that's a very important question. And I'm actually writing a paper on this because there is a misconception here. The brain, when it's in the logical form, it's using the prefrontal cortex, the frontal of the brain. And when it's in the reptile mode, goes to the back of the brain, which is the first brain of emotion and memory. We, people of the world, always can get annoyed, frustrated, can get upset, can get angry. We are a bucket of all kinds of feelings. I definitely get angry, I get frustrated, I become really sometimes uncomfortable in a situation. But you have to remember that the choice of what we want to do with our frustration and anger, it's totally a choice. Has nothing to do with genetic and the brain neurotransmitters. It has to do with the capacity we have and we've learned from our parents on how they responded to frustration, and also the genetic, because the biochemical imbalances can bring rage and can bring that function of fight flight to people. But the choice to be a racist is basically a choice that as much as a person is angry or emotional or using the first brain, the reptile brain is actually in its own power. It's almost like, let's say if someone is angry, they have the choices of throwing something at you, cussing at you, spitting, breaking, or leaving. And that is the choice that it's learned in the family of origin, in our upbringing, and based on our experiences and the traumas that we have experienced and the unfairness of the world. So let's say for African Americans, which my daughter thinks I should say blacks, it's been years of a lot of unfairness and a lot of attack, um, severe punishments. Women have been raped. They couldn't go to school. They couldn't study. It really is deeply rooted. So we have right now people that have been traumatized emotionally, sexually, physically. But the choice we have, as Abdul Baha and Baha'u'llah are writing, is that this is the time that instead of going to that, let's say, masculine brain of aggressive and defensive behavior, why not to use our problem solving or being able to think about the consequence by analyzing the data and by not getting emotional, to be able to logically get to a better place for our children to have a better life. Because if I go back to be vengeful, to be aggressive, and to deal with the world with anger, I'm gonna miss my life moving forward to be as miserable as my ancestors, as my parents, as my grandparents. So this is becoming a choice. And well said in the Baha'i books, it's all about educating our children and helping them to understand what equality is, and to give them a lot of love, and to try to be as fair as is possible. Right now, the human beings, their way of life, the disbursement of money, where they live, how nutritious their food is, it's all depending on where they live, how much money they have, and how fortunate or unfortunate the people around us are. And that makes them again frustrated. But frustration only takes us to aggression and to war. And this is what we're sharing right now, that let's move on to the only brain that humans have, which is only using the front, the wisdom, combination of left brain logic and right brain emotion means wisdom. And as we don't have that much connection, then we have disorders, symptoms, and aggression and wars in the universe. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, perfectly. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi, I think we also have some questions, Anna.
Yes, we have some in the chat. Here,
But let's answer. Someone said hi.
Yes, it was me. Alapa, thank you so much for the great information. I feel so privileged to be able actually to make it, because we were on the way from out of town and we made home just a few minutes before your session started. So very informative and I have a question. I think you mentioned in your in the talk and the questions that was asked about the trauma. So the connection between the right and left brain, when someone is went through trauma during childhood or teenage years, and the emotional stability when you reach adulthood, what would neuroscience say about that? The trauma and I'm a social worker. I work in psychiatric ER, and all they do is just medicate them and send them out, medicate them and send them out. And as you were saying, right. So unfortunately, this is the system, it is there. But even on a personal level, from myself and everybody somehow experiences some kind of trauma, maybe some more severe, some less.
Absolutely.
Right. So how do we make this balance as adults, and how No, please go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so actually what I do, and the reason I went back to school after my postdoctorate, and I really had a tough time learning the brain and becoming a neuroscientist, it took me another 15 years, was just because of that. because I was frustrated with my patients having to take medications to mask the problem. And now we have this amazing gift to do a QEEG brain map to understand the amount of trauma, the location, and to make sure people optimize the brain. Even as a child, if we do a few sessions of neurofeedback and light and motion, which I combined it to neurointegration therapy, and I can send it everywhere around the world, we actually optimize the brain to be able to deal with traumatic brain injuries and with emotional or sexual or physical issues as we grew up better. So everything is about trauma, and we are born traumatically because when we check the brain of the baby out of the womb of the mother, it's all red, meaning anxiety, because it's so traumatic to come to the world. The baby in the womb, the first thing that develops, it's in the first month, the baby in the womb develops the auditory processing. So the babies record the information from the outside and mother from the first month in the womb. And if you don't think that's trauma, so the trauma starts when we actually are conceived. But when we're born and when we have a kind mom or a replacement of a kind mom, that is when all that anxiety changes to trust, to contentment, to the ability to have self-realization and explore the world around us. Unkind mom is the most traumatic experience to the brain of a child. And that's why we see that kids, babies that are in orphanages, either they die because of the enough human touch, or they learn to be actually isolated and they have a lot of emotional issues growing up. So we all have trauma, but we can control the trigger points of the trauma. If I have a problem dealing with the loss of my mom, or if I had an experience with maybe a sexual experience, and if I had actually a head injury, if I fell, if I had seizure, anything emotional, physical, or sexual sits in the brain. But when we do the map, we actually check the temporal, the T3, T4 we call it, and we can see based on the information and the coloring of the electrical activities how much trauma a person has. And by neurointegration therapy, we give opportunity to brain, because remember, brain is neuroplastic. The brain heals itself. The brain cells change every day till we die with the new information. This is new. That's not in the books. And pharmaceuticals are really upset with us. We have so many instruments that the FDA and pharmaceutical made us to sell it for more price because they don't want people to have access to it. And we have nutraceutical labs that pharmaceuticals buy for $500 million and they close it so people won't have access. So it's all about trauma. And if someone has real deep trauma, because we have traumatic brain injury based on the number of traumas. And usually after 3 traumas, the brain aging is faster and the probability of dementia and Alzheimer and memory issues is higher. So if you want to read a great book, it's called Addicted to the Monkey Mind. And I recommend all of you, as you said, we all have trauma. Read this book. It's fascinating. It's full of examples, and it shows our trigger points and how we tend to keep the trauma or the experiences. And when we get emotional, we lose our ability to think with the frontal lobe and have good judgment calls, and therefore we fail to feel better. And remember that when I have stress, when I have trauma, when I don't eat well, everything gets hand to hand to not have a balanced brain and therefore body, because our gut, our stomach is totally connected to our brain, and it's one. And at Mind Therapy Center, we actually check both. We have a metabolite test that it's like reading your fortune again. Just the way I do the brain map, we check what's going on in your body. And you want to optimize the body. You hear about right now talking about immune system. That's immune system is really important. Not having inflammation is really important. Being able to meditate, you know, the prayers, we are so blessed that we can actually sit down and say a prayer and go to that state of mind that it's capable of leaving all the trauma and the sadness and thinking about how I can solve the problem and how I can feel better.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And
Who wrote that?
if you
I'm
go
sorry.
to the website, mindtherapycenter.com, I have everything that I do, and we have a lot of testimonials. If you go on YouTube, some of it in Farsi, some in English, it's all my radio and TV shows. And if you become a friend on Facebook, you also, I have a lot of brain bites and information. And you can always call me, and I can share my phone number. So I have a few questions, Anna. Shall I answer it?
Yes, please. Some of the questions,
Could I
if you
just
don't
ask
mind.
you, who wrote The Monkey Mind?
Oh, that's a question that I'm gonna check with you. Hold on one second. I'll let you know.
Thank you.
I forgot the name. Okay. Tanya says, can severe deficiency due to a poor diet cause mental illness? Can mental illness be treated through food? Too many questions, but I'm gonna keep it short. Mental illness is not a disorder anymore. It's the imbalances of electrical and biochemical uh, uh, modes of the brain. Because brain is neuroplastic and because it's epigenetic, what we do here will change the brain and will bring back connectivity to the brain and will heal and treat the symptoms. So what I say to you is revolutionary. We're teaching it to hospitals, to doctors. In our last meeting regarding brain, we had over 1,000 MD doctors trying to learn the ABC of disorders and neurofeedback. So I'm at a very interesting place as a psychologist and neurotherapist both. And I give you this good news that severe deficiency means both electrical and biochemical, and we measure both, and we help the person to take the right supplements that it's measured by neurolab, depending on what biochemical imbalances we have, and we don't even have to have mental illness to do this. We can optimize the brain, take care of ourselves, I reverse Alzheimer and dementia. So people will have a memory of a 20-year-old because brain is neuroplastic, brain is epigenetic, and we can measure and understand. At some point, the more there is a fraction between emotion and logic, between the left and right hemisphere, the person will have more symptoms. So we are all on the spectrum, from little distractions, attention issue, some tics, stuttering, bedwetting, nail biting. Then we have ADD, ADHD. Then when we have more symptoms, we are OCD. And then we have more symptoms, we are bipolar. And then we are Asperger. Then we are autistic. And then we have schizophrenia. And all these names A to Z was based on the fact that brain is not neuroplastic and epigenetically doesn't matter. Before, when I went to USC, it was 90% genetic and 10% epigenetic. And now it's the reverse. So yes, we actually check the deficiencies both chemically, biochemically, and electrically with the waves of the brain. And also what you eat matters. I have a lot of information on good food, on necessary food for memory, on food for helping people. We have a special 360 transformation kit that everyone will learn how to eat. It's a way of life. It's the correct combination of food and the amount that we need based on every food in the world. And once you learn that, then you will always have a balanced diet and a balanced brain. And Jono said, in this age of smartphones and computer games, etc., how can we teach our children or grandchildren to cope with this situation? They can be easily addicted. This is another 2 hours of session, and I'll be more than happy to send you many charts I have on the effect of electronics on the growing brain of teenagers. Unfortunately, the kids will use electronics. Right now, schools are not, or they're all closed. So kids are on their computer 24/7. And unfortunately, adults are on their computers and electronics and cell phones 24/7. So it is our job to have limits and rules on using all electronics. At least up to age 18, you're in control. So you're going to have, basically, for kids under 10, we have 2 hours limit. Kids under age 4, they should not use the electronics. And if they have the cell phone or iPad or electronics, you should have it on airplane mode, because that amount of electromagnetic force and radiation will affect the growing brain. And the younger we are, the more soft the tissues of the brain are, and the more vulnerable the growing brain of children is. We don't have much data on the kids that grew up, because this is only about 10 years. And now we are looking at teenagers that are the first generation growing up with electronics and computer games and smartphones. And it's interesting to see how the brain mutation can cope with this much information, data, and overpowering the capability of people to record the information in a timely manner. But I want to tell you that if you put the cell phone on your ears without the headphone and away from you, Dr. Black at Cedar Sinai for sure He's a brain doctor. He deals with tumors and cancers. And he notes that usually when he has any operation with people, it's usually on the side that they put their cell phone. And you want to, men also, they carry their cell phone around their waist and stomach and organs. And that's why we see a lot of IVF, because this interrupts productivity in men, and it interrupts and it interferes with the good regulation of your organs. So if you please, if you can, use it as much as you need, and at night, charge it away from your bedroom and keep it away from little kids, and with the older kids, have some rules and regulation. And it's totally addictive. I have a lot of clients that they have electronic addiction, and it's the same as if they are addicted to drugs. And when I take it away, they go to the reptile mode and their hands becomes clogged, and they cry and they look for, they call it a friend, and they say, give my friend back to me. And they cry and they go through the same as if a person is addicted and is going through some sort of it. It's really sad. Aloha Prof from West Malaysia, Didi. And some questions, communities. And this is just a nice reminder from the Universal Host of Justice that our friend wrote. Is there any other, oh, we have more questions. Is there any other question from the audience, or I should continue?
I just wanted to ask you, the book you mentioned, is it by Jeff Benoist?
Yes, yes, thank you.
Yeah,
And that is Addicted, yes, and that's the book, Addicted to the Monkey Mind. And I think it's beautiful reading for all of us. You know, the revolution in Iran is trauma, 9/11 is trauma, birth is trauma, sugar is trauma. Anything can be traumatic experience for the brain.
Life is trauma.
Life is not fair, and life is solving problems. And if we want to be angry, we're not going to get anywhere. And unfortunately, we are going, in my opinion, that 5 challenging years of chaos and darkness has started. And maybe our job as Baha'is is to connect and to give love and compassion and send all the messages of unity that we know. You know, I send many of these little quotes to my friends daily. That's all I can do. And if we should not sit quiet, and we should tell them how the race, the lack of dispersed equality in money is going to cause a lot of pain in the universe.
I wanted to thank you. I'm a music therapist by training, and I wanted to thank you for bringing up music in that.
I want to tell you that many doctors in Europe, they have only music therapy to heal the brain. And I have the instruments, and we actually now we have something that we call brain tapping, and I think each one of you should have one. We combined special music for the left and right hemisphere, combined it with hypnotherapy and with the right amount of light and motion and tapping. So when you experience this, it has this healing effect. It's almost like you maybe said the 10 prayers, and it lifts the pressure and stress, and it brings you closer to being able to problem solve without aggravation and without stress. But music is a very major part of neurointegration therapy, and I would be more than happy if you call me. We have special CDs and discs that I can share with you.
Great. Thank you very much. I'll ask Anna for your information.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, hi. Sorry, what was the name of the author again of the book? I'm ordering it actually very shortly.
Faride John, what was it?
I will write it in the chat.
Thank you. I never remember his name. So, Anajan, is there any, the mindtherapycenter.com is my website. Mind Therapy Center. This is missing the center, Genga. Mindtherapycenter.com, that's correct. Yes, it's J.F. Benoit. It's the author. Thank you, Faridejan.
You are very welcome.
Mom is very quiet there.
She's proud, that's why.
She's heard this too many times.
No, thank you so much. It was such an amazing learning opportunity for all of us, Nanaz Jan. Thank you for accepting our invitation. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your invitation, and Anajan, thank you for all the coordination. And I send you all my Baha'i love, and if you have any questions, if you need anything, you let me know.
Okay, thank you.
We really owe this gathering to dedication of Richard and Anna every single night. I'm very thankful. They do such a great job. Thank you. And thank you. That was a very informative session. Lovely. Thank you
May I
very much.
indulge everyone with our traditional picture taking?
Yeah. Is it your Facebook is in your name?
Okay.
My Facebook, are you asking me?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
hold on,
Yeah,
one
Facebook is
second.
Nanaz Pirnia.
Okay,
One
thank you.
second. Ready, everyone?
Yeah, we're taking a picture, right?
Show your best smiles. Okay, ready? One,
everybody.
1, 2, 3. Okay. May we request someone to say the short closing prayer, please? Jane, you wanna do it?
You took a picture without me. I lost my internet.
Oh,
Oh no.
It's okay.
Jane, you
I
wanna
wanted to have a
say?
Yeah,
picture.
I'll sing something small. Okay. Oh Lord, my God, open thou the door, prepare the means, make safe the path, and pave the way. For verily thou art the help in peril, the self-subsisting, Ya Baha'u'llah.
Thank you. So beautiful.
Thank you, Jane.
anyone would like access to the recording, if I don't have your email yet, if you could put it in the message me in the chat, I can add you. I'd be happy to. And thank you again to Dr. Pirnia for the wonderful talk. It was so interesting and informative. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And by the way, we
Bye.
have a Facebook group also.
Oh, yes.
It's called Baha'i Devotional. All right.
Thank you so much. Aloha, Pa.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much. Bye-bye.
Anna, can you send it to me too? It's Jane.
Sure. Yep.
Thanks.
Me too, Anna and Evelyn.
Okay.
Thanks for arranging this. It was wonderful. Good
It
night.
was fantastic.
That
Good
was
night.
lovely.
Thank you from Mongolia.
Good night.
Oh, thanks for coming.
Thank you. Ah, Mongolia.
You come from Mongolia.
Okay.
Yes, I'm based here. I work here as a clinician.
Oh, Mom, our dear friend Mohan's there. Can he? Yeah, he
Hi,
recognized.
Farnoosh. Yes, we met in Japan.
My mom's there, Mohan, if you can see. Yeah,
I see. Yes, there's Vidal on there. I met her too. Yeah, we met in Yamaguchi at that time. Thank you, Anna. That was very wonderful. I'm so grateful you planned this. You organized this one.
Yes.
It's very impressed. I also do a lot of work in bioenergy medicine, and I'm fully aware of what she is saying. And it was a very good refresher course for me, just listening to her.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Allow
We
us.
have, we have a good friend
God
of
willing.
us live in Mongolia, Hancock's.
Yes, Graham
yeah,
and Graham and Dory Hancock. I know them very well.
Yeah,
I work very
and,
closely with them.
I
I used
hope
to
you
work with the World Bank also. That's how I met them.
Now they live in Melbourne, but moving
Yes,
to
they do.
New Zealand next
Oh,
month.
back, going back.
Yeah,
I see.
he resigned and yeah, he wanted to retire and go
Yes,
back to New
I think he
Zealand.
should. I know his situation, so
Yeah, they
it's
had
good for
planned
him to rest.
actually- Yeah, they
Yes,
had planned
good
to
for
go
him to rest. Mm.
first, but now with this pandemic,
Yes.
they decided to go to New Zealand. Yeah, and my niece came to Mongolia, Afruz Kaviani.
I might have met her. Yes,
Yeah,
that was some. I've been here almost 20 years now.
yeah,
So
lovely to meet you.
lovely to see you. It's so great to see Farnoosh and everyone and Vida Khanum. So happy to, and Jana, of course, I know. So, and get to know all of you, Anna especially. You're very kind and appreciate that immensely.
Yes.
Yes.
It was so lovely to see you, and I'm hoping you come back again and see you again.
Inshallah. God.
Yes, we're here
Okay.
every day at the same time.
Thank you. Allow her. Allow her. Allow her.
Thank you, Anna. That was a beautiful session you guys organized.
Oh,
It was fantastic, Anna. It was
actually,
great.
Mitra's friend, I think, or acquaintance.
Yeah, but you, both of you work really hard. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, very persistent.
Aloha, everybody. Take care. Have a wonderful day or evening or night, depending on where you are in the world.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Good night, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for coming. Bye.
Yes, Lapa.
Bye.